Breaking. At 4:12 p.m. today, Britain crossed a line it has not crossed in living memory. In a single coordinated operation, police units across England, Scotland and Wales arrested more than 700 farmers, community leaders and even ordinary voters. Their alleged crime? Daring to oppose a government policy that legal experts are already calling unconstitutional. But the real shock came just hours later when King Charles III issued what insiders are calling his final warning to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Sources inside Buckingham Palace say the King's words were the sharpest any monarch has delivered to a British government in nearly a century. What was said in that tense exchange could change the future of Britain forever. If you want to understand the gravity of this moment, stay with me, because this is not just about farmers anymore. This is about whether Britain as we know it can survive. For weeks, the signs have been building. Starmer's government rolled out its new taxation framework under the cover of modernising agriculture. But in reality, it was an attack so severe that family farms, some passed down, for generations are being forced into liquidation. Entire villages that rely on farming are staring down extinction. And when communities began to protest, they were labelled not as citizens defending their rights, but as agitators, extremists, even enemies of stability. At first, the crackdown was selective. Isolated arrests of outspoken farmers, targeted raids on barns and meeting halls. But now the operation has escalated into something far more systematic. In the past 72 hours alone, authorities have executed mass detentions sweeping through rural counties in the dead of night. Families describe terrifying scenes, doors kicked down, fathers dragged out in front of children, elderly farmers hauled away in handcuffs. The official justification: preventing disruption to national stability. But when you arrest 700 people for voicing opposition to attacks, it is no longer about stability. It is about silencing dissent. The breaking point came in Yorkshire, where police surrounded a peaceful rally of villagers, many of them pensioners and young families. They weren't throwing stones, they weren't rioting, they were holding up handwritten signs. One of them simply read, "We are citizens, not criminals." By the end of the day, dozens were arrested buses, filled with detainees, driven away to undisclosed locations. Witnesses say those who resisted were beaten. Videos leaked online show police in full riot gear, pushing a 74-year-old farmer to the ground as his wife screamed for mercy. That clip has already been viewed millions of times, and it is spreading faster than the government can censor it. But what makes this moment unlike any before is the reaction it provoked inside Buckingham Palace. Sources with direct knowledge of palace discussions describe the king as furious, his patience with Starmer's government evaporating. One insider reports that Charles, after reviewing footage of elderly citizens being dragged from their land, told aides, "This is not governance. This is tyranny." Those words are significant. The monarch is constitutionally bound to remain neutral to serve as a figure above politics. But insiders say Charles is approaching the point where silence may no longer be an option. Today's confrontation may have pushed him over the edge. Just hours after the mass arrests, the Prime Minister was summoned to the palace for what palace officials described as an urgent and extraordinary audience. This is not ceremonial language. This was not a polite tea-time briefing. One source described the atmosphere as tense, icy, and historic. Starmer was reportedly told, in blunt terms, that his government had crossed into territory unseen in modern Britain. The King's warning, according to those present, was nothing less than a final ultimatum. End the repression or risk a crisis that could shatter the very foundation of the state. What happens next is deeply uncertain. Government insiders have already leaked that Starmer does not intend to back down. In fact, documents circulating inside Downing Street refer to the next phase of what they chillingly call behavioural stabilisation measures. That phrase alone should send shivers down the spine of anyone who values liberty. It means surveillance, it means preemptive arrests, and it means teaching the population to obey through fear. But here's the danger. Every attempt to crush resistance is having the opposite effect. Communities are not breaking, they are uniting. In Somerset, villagers have begun gathering nightly for candlelit vigils, holding signs that read, "We will not be silenced." In Wales, churches and chapels have opened their doors, as sanctuaries refusing to let police enter without a warrant. In Scotland, encrypted networks are buzzing, sharing information about how to document abuses and bypass state-controlled messaging. The scale of this crisis is unlike anything Britain has faced in modern times. For the first time in living memory, the monarchy, the government, and the people are pulling in three completely different directions. Each believes it is fighting for the survival of Britain. Each believes surrender is impossible. And now, with over 700 farmers and voters behind bars, the clash between them is reaching a breaking point. Starmer's administration insists these arrests are about maintaining order, but leaked memos from within Downing Street reveal something far darker. One briefing document, verified by 2 independent sources, describes the arrested farmers and voters not as citizens, but as instability assets. Think about that language for a moment. Human beings, mothers, fathers, veterans, pensioners, reduced to assets as though they are problems to be managed rather than people with rights. Another section of the memo speaks of normalisation protocols, which appear to mean retraining citizens to accept new standards of obedience. In plain English, it is about reshaping society by force. But the government's problem is simple. Britain's people are not obeying. In London, a silent march of 60,000 citizens stretched from Trafalgar Square to Parliament. No chants, no violence. Just rows of people walking in silence, holding candles and signs reading, "We are Britain." Police hesitated to move in, fearing that arrests on that scale would provoke even greater backlash. In Manchester, families of the detained occupied the steps of the town hall demanding answers. And in rural counties, something even more powerful is happening: solidarity. Farmers who have not yet been targeted are refusing to sell to government suppliers. Truckers are refusing to transport confiscated goods. Even small shop owners are closing their doors in protest. The economy itself is beginning to resist. International pressure is mounting too. The European Union has already suspended cooperation talks with London, citing human rights concerns. The United States issued a rare statement warning that Britain's global reputation as a democracy is at risk. Amnesty International has labelled the arrests a systematic suppression of dissent. And the United Nations is quietly preparing to debate Britain's treatment of its own citizens, an unprecedented move for a founding member of modern democracy. The world is not just watching, it is judging. And yet the most decisive voice remains silent, at least for now. King Charles has delivered his final private warning. But will he dare to speak publicly? Palace insiders whisper that a speech has already been written, one that begins with words no British monarch has spoken in nearly a century. "My people, I cannot remain silent." If Charles utters those words, it will rip through the heart of Britain's constitutional order. The government would be exposed. The monarchy would be transformed and the nation would be plunged into a constitutional crisis with no clear outcome. But if he stays silent, he risks something even greater: the trust of his people. For many Britons, this may be the last test of whether the crown still serves the people, or whether it is merely a decoration in times of tyranny. Meanwhile, the arrests continue. A 19-year-old student in Birmingham was detained yesterday for posting a single tweet that read, "Democracy means dissent." In Essex, police raided a family farm at dawn, arresting a father of 4 as his children watched from the doorway. In Glasgow, a 68-year-old veteran was dragged from a public square for holding a sign that said, "Simply freedom." These are not isolated incidents. This is the new normal the government is trying to enforce. But every arrest is becoming a spark. Every detention is fueling a fire the government cannot control. The standoff cannot last forever. At some point, something must give. Will the government escalate to even harsher measures? Will the people rise in defiance too massive to suppress? Or will the king finally break his silence, stepping across a line no monarch has dared cross in nearly 100 years? The answer to those questions will determine whether Britain remains the nation that once stood alone against tyranny, or whether it becomes a cautionary tale of how quickly freedom can vanish when leaders choose power over principle. For now, one thing is certain: the battle lines are drawn. The people refuse to bow. The government refuses to relent. And the crown stands at a crossroads between silence and action. The next move will decide everything: the fate of the monarchy, the survival of democracy, and the future of Britain itself. This story is not just news, it is history in motion. And the clock is ticking. Stay with us, because every hour brings new revelations, new dangers, and new choices that will shape the destiny of a nation. And ask yourself this: if King Charles does not act now, then who will?